Hollywood sold us dreams. But behind the gowns, the spotlights, and the studio gloss was a darker truth. Fame had a price, and scandal was often the currency. These weren't just actresses. They were survivors, strategists, and sometimes beautifully packaged disasters. In a system built to exploit, they played the game, or cheated it. And whether they were crowned or crucified, one thing was certain: everyone was watching. This is the untold story of 25 Golden Age actresses who didn't follow the rules. They rewrote them, with lipstick, lies, and a little help from the tabloids. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Midnight in New York? 3 a.m. in Manila? Let's see how far the scandal spreads. 1. Elizabeth Taylor. There are movie stars, and then there was Elizabeth Taylor, a woman whose off-screen life often drew more ticket sales than the films she starred in. She wasn't just a headline, she was the headline. With violet eyes sharp enough to slice diamonds and a string of weddings that seemed less like personal decisions and more like marketing campaigns, Elizabeth knew how to convert personal chaos into box office gold. Her most infamous maneuver? Falling in love with Eddie Fisher, a man inconveniently married to America's sweetheart, Debbie Reynolds. It was a scandal perfectly timed, almost suspiciously so, aligning with the release of Butterfield 8, a film where she played, fittingly, a morally dubious woman tangled in doomed romance. The affair detonated like a Hollywood publicity nuke. Tabloids didn't just cover it, they fed on it, reproduced it, and spoon-fed it to the public until Taylor wasn't just acting in melodramas, she was living them. Studios didn't just tolerate it, they orchestrated around it. MGM spun her personal wreckage into a siren's mystique, crafting narratives of misunderstood passion, divine beauty, and unstoppable desire. And the public? They bought it, again and again. Watching her climb the red carpet in diamonds larger than most people's mortgages, you'd think scandal was her chosen currency, which, in a way, it was. But Elizabeth didn't start the fire. She just walked through it in couture heels, turning ash into artifact. And behind her, a trail of women who learned that, in Hollywood, infamy sells faster than talent ever could. Speaking of which, Marilyn Monroe didn't need diamonds. She had secrets, and secrets burn brighter than jewels when everyone's watching. 2. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was a contradiction in a bottle. Sex symbol and tragic poet, dumb blonde and underground intellectual, goddess and ghost. But what really launched her wasn't just her breathy voice or that unforgettable walk. It was timing, luck, and a whisper campaign dressed up as destiny. She didn't kick down Hollywood's golden gates with a resume. She seduced them open. Monroe understood the real casting couch wasn't always leather. Sometimes it was a dinner table, a hotel lobby, or the back of a studio lot where the lights were always on. Rumors swirled faster than camera reels. Affairs with powerful men, whispers of White House connections, bedroom visits traded like baseball cards among columnists and chauffeurs. The ambiguity was the point. Monroe never confirmed, never denied. That shimmer of uncertainty made her myth bulletproof. Her marriages to Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller were less about fairy tale romance and more about psychological theater. With DiMaggio, it was beauty tamed by baseball. With Miller, it was bombshell meets brain. Both relationships collapsed under the weight of Monroe's public image. A woman too adored to be loved properly. Studios leaned into the persona, selling not just her movies but the fantasy of having her, or saving her, to every man with a dollar and a darkroom. In a world that asked women to stay small, Monroe became monumental, and then was punished for it. She played the fool to fool the world, but the script was always written by someone else. Still, Marilyn's breathy enigma was only one kind of scandal. Ingrid Bergman, on the other hand, chose exile over apology, and that made America furious. If you're still with us after that, You're exactly the kind of listener we love. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? We want to know who else is wide awake, wandering through old Hollywood's ruins with us. 3. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman wasn't supposed to fall from grace. She was the cinematic embodiment of European purity, the luminous Swede with a face so noble it made even the word virtue blush. When she smiled in Casablanca, the world believed it. When she cried, they cried too. She was Hollywood's moral center, until she became its moral warning. In 1950, Bergman detonated her own reputation with what some Americans genuinely called a betrayal of national values. Her affair with Italian director Roberto Rossellini wasn't just scandalous. It was international treason, apparently. Both were married. Neither asked for forgiveness. And when Ingrid became pregnant with Rossellini's child, the reaction was so severe that the U.S. Senate actually denounced her in a formal session. That's right. In a country brewing Cold War paranoia, one European actress's love life was seen as an existential threat to public morality. Studios scrambled. She was blacklisted, exiled, recast from saint to scarlet woman. Her fall was less a stumble and more a Shakespearean plunge, made worse by the fact that she refused to grovel. No staged tears, no scripted repentance, just a one-way ticket to Europe and a career reset, directed by the very man she sinned with. Years later, she returned to Hollywood, Oscar in hand, greeted not with shame but applause. But the stain never fully washed out, and that's what made her legend endure. Of course, some actresses didn't need foreign exile or political scandal. Lana Turner found enough drama in her own living room, and the tabloids were parked right outside the window. 4. Lana Turner. Lana Turner didn't just attract scandal. She made it fashionable. Discovered at a soda fountain in Hollywood, she rose from mythology on a bar stool to full-blown stardom in a leopard print sprint. By the time she was 18, she was already a studio man's dream and a columnist's favorite nightmare. But Lana wasn't just beautiful. She was volatile, magnetic, and always hovering near the edge of something tabloid-worthy. She married 7 times, and dated like she was racing the clock. Her romances were messy, public, and often perfectly timed with film releases. But all of that paled next to the 1958 incident that turned her from silver screen siren to scandal encyclopedia. Her teenage daughter, Cheryl, killed Lana's abusive boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, during a domestic altercation. The courts called it justifiable. The public called it something else entirely. Hollywood turned it into a soap opera with real-life stakes. Lana wept on the witness stand in full mascara, and newspapers printed every frame. It should have ended her career. Instead, it fed it. MGM repackaged her as the tragic mother, the wronged woman, the star who'd been through hell and kept her lipstick on. Her next film? Imitation of Life, a melodrama so steeped in grief and glamour, audiences couldn't tell where Lana ended and the script began. But she wasn't alone in making pain profitable. Ava Gardner had already beaten her to it, with a bottle in one hand and Sinatra's heart in the other. 5. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner didn't just walk into a room. She crashed through it like a southern storm in a silk dress. Critics called her the most beautiful woman in the world, but beauty was just the decoy. Underneath the cheekbones and red lips was someone no studio could fully script, and they tried. Oh, how they tried. Born poor in North Carolina, Ava wasn't supposed to end up at the epicenter of Hollywood's most expensive love triangle. But when she married Frank Sinatra, during his very public, very scandalous divorce from Nancy Sinatra, Ava went from rising star to tabloid royalty overnight. She was the siren who stole Old Blue Eyes. Headlines blared, fan clubs revolted, and studio PR teams nearly passed out from exhaustion. Their marriage was chaos, passion, and press, sometimes in that order. Rumors of affairs, Fights, reconciliations, and dramatic departures became serialized gossip, with columnists chronicling each installment like scripture. But Ava was no victim. She weaponized her own allure, gave just enough to the press to keep the cameras pointed her way, then disappeared into the Spanish countryside or a European villa when it suited her. Studios used her image to sell sex appeal wrapped in rebellion. A perfect cocktail for post-war audiences hungry for glamour and danger. And Ava delivered, on screen and off, never quite letting anyone tell whether they were watching a role or the real thing. But if Ava was a hurricane, Rita Hayworth was a mirage, dazzling, distant, and perpetually misunderstood by the men who claimed to own her. 6. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth was every GI's dream pinned to a locker, but behind the poster was a woman perpetually edited by everyone but herself. Born Margarita Cancino, she was rebranded by Columbia Pictures, name, hairline, identity, into a red-headed bombshell palatable to American audiences. Hollywood didn't just discover her, it redesigned her from scratch. The transformation worked. Rita became the symbol of 1940s seduction, immortalized in Gilda, where a single glove removal turned into an erotic national event. But while America fell in love with the image, Rita was choking on it. Her personal life became open terrain for press speculation, not least because she married 5 times. And each husband seemed increasingly perplexed by the fact that they had married a woman, not a fantasy. Her second husband, Orson Welles, admitted he never really knew her. Her third, Prince Ali Khan, tried to turn her into royalty, and failed. Studios fed the press with stories of tempestuous relationships, while the tabloids painted her as both tragic and treacherous, depending on the week. The woman who symbolized desire for an entire generation couldn't seem to find anyone who actually saw her. She once famously said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with me." It was meant as a lament, but it doubled as her epitaph, a haunting truth behind the glitter. And if Rita was the mirage, then Joan Crawford was the storm, with ambition sharper than stilettos and enough enemies to fuel a dozen feuds. 7. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford didn't rise to fame. She clawed her way up, leaving a trail of gossip, grudges, and perfectly arched eyebrows behind her. She wasn't born into stardom. She reverse-engineered it, reinvented herself, polished the rough edges, and let the tabloids speculate endlessly about where she came from. Because mystery was better for business. And Joan understood business better than most studio executives. By the time she hit her stride at MGM, she had perfected a dangerous art, turning personal drama into public currency. Her marriages, several of them spectacularly turbulent, were covered like high-stakes boxing matches. The rumors? Endless. Affairs whispered about by columnists, rivalries embroidered by gossip writers, and a carefully curated persona that demanded to be both adored and feared. And then came the feud that became Hollywood scripture, Joan Crawford versus Bette Davis. It started as professional rivalry, escalated to mutual disdain, and evolved into a press-fueled saga so overblown that journalists practically salivated waiting for the next icy glare or barbed comment. Studios leaned into it, feeding the public little morsels of animosity whenever a film release needed a bump. Joan understood. Conflict was branding. Even her image, the tailored suits, the severe shoulders, the immaculate poise, was a kind of armor. She wasn't just surviving Hollywood. She was studying it, manipulating it, outplaying it. The scandals didn't derail her. They powered her. But if Joan was the strategist, Bette Davis was the firecracker. Unpredictable, sharp-tongued, and perfectly willing to say the quiet part out loud. 8. Bette Davis. Bette Davis didn't cheat her way to fame. She simply refused to play nice on her way up. She was all sharp wit and sharper cheekbones, a hurricane in a satin gown. If Joan Crawford was the architect of her own mythology, Bet was the demolition crew tearing down anyone who stood between her and a good role. Hollywood tried to mold her. She laughed in its face. Studios wanted docile glamour. She delivered volcanic intensity. And with that intensity came chaos. Dramatic divorces, messy affairs, and enough courtroom battles with Warner Brothers to earn her a reputation as the industry's most stubborn truth-teller. She didn't whisper her grievances to columnists. She announced them like breaking news. And the public loved her for it. The feud with Joan Crawford, gossip gold for decades, became a saga of professional sabotage, backhanded compliments, and the kind of behavior studio PR departments pretended not to see. Whether every story was true didn't matter. The idea of Bet and Joan battling for the same spotlight was too irresistible for Hollywood to ignore. Every scandal, real or exaggerated, only added to her persona. The actress who wouldn't apologize for wanting what she believed she deserved. She made ambition look messy, dangerous, and thrilling. And audiences couldn't look away. But if Bet's battles were waged on studio lots, Vivien Leigh's were fought on a more fragile battlefield. Her own mind under the relentless glare of the world's spotlight. 9. Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh lived in the gap between legend and disintegration. Adored on stage, mythologized on screen, and slowly unraveled behind the scenes. When she played Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, the role consumed her, and the public consumed the fantasy. But while audiences believed they were watching a star being born, what they were really seeing was a woman performing her own perfection, frame by fragile frame. Married to Laurence Olivier, the royal couple of the British acting world, Vivien seemed to have everything: talent, beauty, acclaim, and a husband who matched her in intensity. But the truth bled through the edges. Their romance, as chronicled by columnists and breathlessly repeated by fans, was built on passion and pressure, with the spotlight turning every argument into epic tragedy. The tabloids didn't care much for nuance. They reported on her breakdowns with the same glee they used to praise her brilliance. What Hollywood couldn't package was the unpredictability, the shifts in behavior, the storms she couldn't explain. But instead of support, she got speculation. Instead of empathy, she got columns. The studios stepped back, afraid her instability would taint their profits. So the same industry that applauded her greatness quietly made her disappear when the curtain dropped. But if Vivien Leigh was crushed under the weight of expectation, Jean Harlow never even made it out of the studio system's labyrinth alive. Her myth sealed by a death shrouded in confusion and a scandal that MGM could barely keep contained. 10. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow wasn't built for subtlety. She arrived in Hollywood like a bottle of peroxide had exploded and somehow learned how to walk. With her platinum hair and disarming charm, she embodied the pre-code ideal: dangerous innocence, draped in silk and scandal. She was marketed as the original blonde bombshell, and America couldn't look away. But behind the smirks and satin was a life perpetually tangled in studio politics, controlling contracts, and relationships that blurred every boundary. Her marriage to MGM producer Paul Byrne was supposed to stabilize her image. Instead, it became the kind of tabloid nightmare no studio flack could spin clean. Just weeks after the wedding, Byrne was found dead in their home under murky, highly suspicious circumstances. Official explanations changed by the day. Rumors spiraled. Mob involvement, secret affairs, cover-ups. MGM rushed to sanitize the story, hiring fixers to mop up everything except the public's obsession. Harlow, for her part, was told to smile through the storm. And she did. Sort of. She kept making movies, still delivering those impossibly sultry performances with a wink that seemed to say, "Yes, I know what you heard, and no, I'm not telling." The studio leaned into the mystery, milking it for publicity, while privately keeping her on a tight leash. She became the perfect contradiction, a woman both hyper-visible and tragically unprotected, a commodity too valuable to truly care for. But behind every studio-controlled scandal stood another actress trying to steer her own story. And Barbara Stanwyck was more than ready to write hers in ink. 11. Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck was a woman who understood the assignment. She didn't flirt with fame. She grabbed it by the collar, gave it a hard stare, and made it earn her respect. Raised in poverty and orphaned young, she wasn't bred for Hollywood's champagne brunches or dainty scandals. She was tough. Not in the performative, studio-mandated way, but in the "I'll survive this town without your approval" way. And survive she did, with sharp roles, sharper dialogue, and a public image that always stayed just a few shades darker than the golden glow the studios preferred. But even Stanwyck couldn't sidestep the gossip machine. Her marriage to heartthrob Robert Taylor, carefully marketed as a dream match, was riddled with rumors from the start. Some whispered that it was a studio arrangement, a protective move in an era where image meant everything and deviation was career-ending. Others said she held too much control in the relationship, that he resented it, that the marriage was more business than bliss. When they finally divorced, the press had a field day, but neither of them gave much to chew on. Barbara didn't explain, and Robert didn't correct. She kept her silence the way she kept her contracts, tightly guarded and expertly negotiated. Her mystery became her protection. While other actresses leaked private details like perfume, Stanwyck gave you what she wanted, nothing more. She made cynicism look noble and scandal look irrelevant. But if Stanwyck handled fame with cold calculation, Carole Lombard handled it with a wink, a punchline, and a camera-ready grin that masked one of the most public romances and private heartbreaks in Golden Age Hollywood. 12. Carole Lombard. Carole Lombard laughed her way into legend, loud, irreverent, whip-smart, and never quite playing the part the studio wrote for her. While many actresses leaned into softness, Carole leaned into slapstick, speed, and spectacle. She didn't just deliver punchlines, she threw them like fastballs. And in the golden glow of 1930s screwball comedies, she shined as Hollywood's high priestess of chaos. But it wasn't just her on-screen timing that had audiences watching. Her love life was practically serialized in gossip columns. Early affairs, flings, and rumored dalliances gave her a reputation as Hollywood's lovable troublemaker, someone who didn't take romance or herself too seriously. That all changed when she fell for Clark Gable, the undisputed king of the box office and the kind of star whose name could swallow up lesser headlines. Their relationship was messy, public, and completely irresistible to the press. The problem? Gable was already married. To someone else. The affair wasn't subtle. The studios pretended to be shocked. Columnists pretended not to be thrilled. And Carole, never one to beg for approval, leaned into it. When they finally married, it was billed as a fairy tale. Hollywood royalty uniting, past sins neatly swept under the red carpet. But that public bliss came with a price. Every moment of her marriage, every move she made, was put under a microscope. What began as a scandal turned into America's favorite love story. The kind Hollywood loves best. Complicated, profitable, and always just one step from disaster. And before there was a Carole Lombard, there was a Gloria Swanson. Already breaking rules, breaking hearts, and building scandal into stardom decades before it was fashionable. 13. Gloria Swanson. Before Hollywood became a machine, Gloria Swanson was already learning how to drive it. She wasn't just one of the first true movie stars. She helped invent what that even meant. Long before paparazzi chased limousines or publicists massaged scandals, Gloria was already weaponizing her personal life for public fascination. And the most explosive chapter of that life? Her long, highly controversial affair with Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. Yes, that Kennedy, the patriarch of America's most image-obsessed political dynasty. Their relationship was the stuff of whispered legends, a powerful studio head and a married businessman funding her films, buying her silence, and quite possibly buying the illusion that he could control her. He couldn't. The affair became a scandal not just for the bedroom intrigue, but for how openly it reflected the power games of early Hollywood. It blurred the line between studio favoritism and romantic opportunism, and Gloria knew exactly how much to let leak. The public disapproved. The industry held its breath. And Gloria? She moved on, always slightly ahead of the fallout, always dressed for the next scene. But while Gloria carefully played her cards with men of power, Greta Garbo played hers with silence, mastering the art of mystery in a world addicted to oversharing long before social media existed. 14. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo didn't need scandal. She needed shadows. She built an entire career out of restraint, ambiguity, and one famously repeated line, "I want to be alone." And yet, the more she withdrew, the more the public became obsessed. She wasn't just an actress. She was a paradox wrapped in pearls and perfectly lit melancholy. Hollywood didn't know what to make of her. She refused interviews, rarely attended premieres, and avoided the press like it was contagious. That didn't stop the speculation. Rumors swirled constantly about her private life. Alleged affairs, gender non-conforming relationships, mysterious absences. It was all smoke and hearsay, and Garbo never fanned the flames. But she never doused them either. That was her trick. She didn't deny the rumors, because the mystery was more valuable than any truth she could offer. Studios didn't like it. She wasn't playing the game. But her box office numbers told a different story. The audience didn't just tolerate her mystique, they craved it. In an era where actresses were expected to bare their souls in scandals, Garbo turned inward and made the void her brand. But not every star could afford to retreat. Louise Brooks didn't just push back against the system. She walked away from it and left a legacy of rebellion scattered in her wake. 15. Louise Brooks. Louise Brooks didn't play the game. She flipped the board and walked away while the rest of Hollywood scrambled to put the pieces back together. With her blunt-cut bob and equally blunt opinions, she didn't just look modern. She was modern, decades ahead of her time in both attitude and style. In an industry built on compliance and illusion, Brooks was a walking act of defiance, and the system never forgave her for it. She refused to sign the standard studio contracts, rejected roles she found demeaning, and turned down fame like it was a bad deal, which, to her, it was. Hollywood tried to label her difficult, but what they really meant was uncontrollable. Behind the scenes, she had relationships that studios couldn't neatly wrap in press releases. She didn't care who talked, and eventually, she talked back, in memoirs that later exposed a world of manipulation, hypocrisy, and exploitation, long before it became fashionable to do so. Brooks didn't fall from grace. She shrugged it off. Her exit from the industry wasn't tragic. It was principled. She traded superstardom for integrity and let history figure out the rest. Spoiler, it did. She became a cult icon posthumously. The kind of legend only understood in retrospect. But if Brooks represented rebellion, Mae West represented total domination, wielding controversy like a feathered boa and turning every scandal into a standing ovation. 16. Mae West. Mae West didn't just push boundaries. She waltzed over them in heels and demanded applause afterward. Before most of Hollywood even knew where the lines were, Mae was busy erasing them with a wink and a punchline. She wrote her own plays, starred in her own films, and transformed her bold sexuality into a brand before studios even had the word for it. Of course, the censors hated her. That was the point. Mae used scandal as oxygen. The more the press clutched their pearls, the more the public showed up. She played roles that were taboo by design. The seductress, the provocateur, the woman who wanted what she wanted and saw no reason to apologize for it. Studio execs tried to rein her in, but they needed her box office numbers more than she needed their approval. Off-screen, the gossip columns never stopped. Were the rumors true? Sometimes yes. Often she let them grow without comment. a mysterious string of lovers, ambiguous living arrangements, and a refusal to conform kept her both relevant and untouchable. She was proof that a woman didn't have to play dumb to play the game. She just had to be smarter than everyone else at the table. But where May flirted with fire and turned it into comedy, Judy Garland was handed the flames and told to keep singing through the smoke. 17. Judy Garland. Judy Garland was the girl next door who never got to go home. To the world, she was the eternal ingenue, sweet, wide-eyed, just one note away from a standing ovation. But behind the curtain, she was Hollywood's most tragic balancing act, tiptoeing between vulnerability and survival in a studio system that treated her like a commodity wrapped in sequins. From the moment she stepped on an MGM soundstage, Judy was managed, molded, and manipulated. Her body, her voice, her schedule, all micromanaged by men in suits who measured her worth in ticket sales. Her relationships? The press devoured them. Marriage after marriage, tabloid melodramas, romantic chaos dressed up as tragic brilliance. Every heartbreak became a headline. Studios fed the drama, then sold the redemption arc. Rinse, repeat. And yet, through it all, Judy delivered. Audiences saw magic. They didn't hear the chaos backstage. They didn't see the pressure that made her fall apart just off camera. Or maybe they did, and loved her more for it. Her scandals weren't footnotes. They were plot points, used to elevate her myth. She sang of somewhere over the rainbow while chained to the gray machinery behind the scenes. But not all women were shackled quietly. Hedy Lamarr, brilliant and misunderstood, wasn't just a beauty. She was a storm with a secret blueprint for something far bigger than stardom. 18. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was marketed as the most beautiful woman in the world, which, in Hollywood math, meant she couldn't possibly be anything else. Her face lit up the screen, her name sold tickets, and her beauty made headlines. But her brain? That didn't fit the narrative. Studios liked their actresses decorative, not disruptive. Hedy refused the memo. She played the part of the glamorous distraction, all while secretly working on inventions in her spare time, including a frequency hopping system that would later form the foundation of modern wireless tech. But while her mind was busy solving real-world problems, the gossip machine focused on who she was sleeping with. Her multiple marriages made her an easy target for scandal-hungry tabloids, who spun her personal life into something between a soap opera and a cautionary tale. Affairs, divorces, rumors, all amplified, all monetized. And yet, Lamarr never seemed particularly concerned with managing the story. She knew what the public wanted, and she let them have it, smiling just enough to keep the cameras rolling. Meanwhile, she kept inventing, kept creating, kept being underestimated. In an industry that boxed women in with lipstick and camera angles, she quietly built something that would outlast every tabloid headline. Tallulah Bankhead, on the other hand, didn't try to outsmart the system. She outlaughed it, outdrank it, and outshocked it at every turn. 19. Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead wasn't just scandalous. She was professionally scandalous. If Hollywood was a stage, she performed in all caps, with a martini in one hand and a dare in the other. While other actresses tiptoed around studio rules, Tallulah kicked the door open, made a scene, and lit a cigarette in the ashes. She didn't bend the rules. She mocked them out loud and dared the press to keep up. She came from political royalty. Her father was a U.S. congressman, but Tallulah traded decorum for drama. The tabloids adored her because she gave them exactly what they wanted: outrageous quotes, notorious parties, and an open-door policy when it came to rumors. Her affairs, both rumored and confirmed, defied the expectations of her time. She didn't deny. She didn't explain. She just was. Larger than life, unapologetically wild, and utterly uninterested in respectability. Studios didn't know what to do with her. Directors loved her talent, but her unpredictability terrified the PR departments. And that was the appeal. Tallulah didn't climb the ladder. She danced on it, threw it into the pool, and made the headlines carry her career. For her, fame was a game of chaos, and she usually won. But while Tallulah turned scandal into performance art, Paulette Goddard turned charm into currency, and her relationships into career strategy with precision worthy of a chess master. 20. Paulette Goddard. Paulette Goddard had that glittering, unbothered energy, the kind that made people underestimate her right before she took their job, their spotlight, and occasionally their leading man. She wasn't loud about her ambition. She just quietly aligned herself with power, and she made it look effortless. Her most talked about alignment? Charlie Chaplin. Their relationship was the stuff of Hollywood legend, glamorous, chaotic, and conveniently timed to boost both of their careers. Whether their marriage was legal or not was anyone's guess, and a favorite gossip column mystery. But what mattered was the image. Paulette, the dazzling muse, standing beside one of Hollywood's biggest icons. It worked. Her profile skyrocketed, and studios took notice. She followed it up with high-profile romances, carefully curated friendships, and a sense of timing that made her scandal-proof. While others were caught off guard by the glare of public scrutiny, Paulette always seemed to be posing just right when the flashbulbs popped. She let the gossip swirl without ever letting it land. Never defensive, never rattled. And when her career slowed, she didn't flail. She pivoted. Married a billionaire, moved to Europe, and lived out her days like the starlet who'd won the long game. But for Dorothy Dandridge, no amount of strategy could shield her from a system designed to love her on camera and punish her off it. 21. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was born into a spotlight that never quite warmed her. She wasn't just a star. She was a disruption. A black leading lady in an era when Hollywood barely allowed black actresses to speak, let alone seduce, carry, or complicate a storyline. So when Dorothy Dandridge stepped onto the screen in Carmen Jones, confident and radiant and unapologetically central, it wasn't just a performance. It was a political event wrapped in technicolor. The public called her the Black Marilyn Monroe, but Dorothy didn't need a comparison. She was already her own category, and that terrified the system. Every step she took into stardom came with a price. Her relationships, especially with white men, were spun into scandal by tabloids that barely hid their prejudice. Studios tried to play both sides, marketing her beauty while restricting her roles, applauding her performance while refusing to give her a future. Dandridge fought back in the only ways the era allowed, with elegance, with presence, with just enough fire in her gaze to suggest she was always a few seconds away from saying exactly what she thought. But the glass ceiling she cracked was also lined with daggers. While other actresses navigated gossip, Dorothy navigated racism, and the kind of scandal that only existed because she wasn't allowed to play the game by the same rules. And if Dorothy was punished for trying to rewrite the rules, Clara Bow was punished for never pretending to care about them in the first place. 22. Clara Bow. Clara Bow didn't act like a flapper. She was one. She didn't invent the it girl, she became it, with wild eyes, fast cars, and a Brooklyn accent that gave studio execs migraines. In the silent film era, Clara was electricity on celluloid, a live wire of unfiltered charisma and raw emotion. She wasn't polished, she wasn't refined, she was real. And that made her irresistible. But realness was dangerous currency in an industry that thrived on illusion. Clara's rise was meteoric, and so was the backlash. The press called her vulgar. Rivals spread whispers. Entire smear campaigns were launched against her, some cruel, some absurd, many completely fabricated. Tabloids claimed she slept her way through Hollywood, that she had affairs with women, that she ran with gangsters, partied with bootleggers, even committed crimes she'd never heard of. None of it mattered. The story sold, and the truth came second. What made Clara a threat wasn't her behavior. It was her refusal to pretend. She didn't mask her accent, didn't clean up her past, didn't kiss the ring of studio executives who expected obedience. They tried to mold her. She grinned and broke the mold in half. Eventually, Hollywood moved on. But Clara never really asked it for permission in the first place. And while Clara's legacy was buried under lies, Norma Shearer's reputation was polished by power and shadowed by one very strategic marriage. 23. Norma Shearer. Norma Shearer wasn't just a star, she was a strategic operator in pearls and perfect posture. To the public, she was MGM's queen of class, embodying elegance, virtue, and a quiet kind of authority. But behind the velvet curtain, Norma was playing chess while most of her peers were still learning checkers. And the biggest piece on her board? Irving Thalberg, the boy wonder of MGM and her husband. Their marriage was the subject of endless studio gossip. Some called it a love story. Others called it a career move. Either way, Norma knew exactly how to use it. Being married to the head of production came with perks, plum rolls, glossy publicity, and just enough protection to experiment with edgier characters before the censors came knocking. And she did experiment, playing adulteresses, seductresses, and morally ambiguous women, all while maintaining a reputation as Hollywood royalty. Of course, the whispers never stopped. Did she earn her roles? Or were they handed to her across the breakfast table? Did her power die with Thalberg, or did she already know the clock was ticking? After his death, the studio cooled toward her. Her roles became fewer, her control weaker. Suddenly, the woman who had once defied the Hays Code with a wink was reduced to speculation and fading marquee letters. And while Norma managed her image with grace, Joan Bennett found herself in a scandal so explosive it couldn't be spun. It had to be survived. 24. Joan Bennett. Joan Bennett was always more than just the shadow of her famous last name. She wasn't trying to be the next anything. She was already too busy shifting from platinum blonde bombshell to noir femme fatale, playing dangerous women with a softness that made the danger feel personal. Her transformation was deliberate, smart, and successful, until it collided head-on with a scandal straight out of Pulp Fiction. In 1951, Bennett's husband, powerful producer Walter Wanger, shot her agent Jennings Lang in a parking lot. The motive? Jealousy. Suspicion of an affair. The fallout? Instant tabloid chaos. It was the kind of story Hollywood pretended to be shocked by but secretly lived for. Bennett claimed innocence. Lang survived. Wanger went to jail. And Joan? She was left with a career suddenly shrouded in whispered judgments and moral finger-pointing. Before the shooting, she had been riding high off the success of The Woman in the Window and Scarlet Street. But afterward, roles dried up, endorsements disappeared, and the public treated her not as a victim of her husband's violence, but as the architect of the scandal. Never mind that she hadn't pulled the trigger. In Hollywood, guilt is a matter of optics, not evidence. Still, she didn't disappear. She adapted. She moved to television, stage, anything that kept her working. Joan Bennett didn't go quietly. But while Joan was busy dodging bullets and headlines, Veronica Lake was battling a different kind of enemy. The one waiting in her mirror. 25. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake was never supposed to last. She was lightning in a bottle. Blonde, cool, and dangerously close to ethereal. Her peekaboo hairstyle alone caused a national craze, even a safety hazard among female factory workers during World War II. That kind of iconic image is the stuff careers are built on, but in Lake's case, it became a trap. She rose fast, too fast, through a Hollywood system that adored her look but never seemed to trust her. Her roles were variations on the same dream, icy blondes with smirks sharp enough to wound. But off-screen, the dream cracked. Studio bosses labeled her difficult, code for unruly, in an industry that punished actresses for having opinions, moods, or personal boundaries. The gossip columns ran with every whisper. Failed marriages, on-set feuds, alcohol problems, affairs with actors whose names sold magazines. Whether half of it was true didn't matter. It stuck. By the 1950s, Veronica's image, once the height of wartime glamour, had worn thin. The press stopped swooning. The studio stopped calling. And she faded, not with scandalous spectacle, but with something worse in Hollywood. Silence. But Lake's fall wasn't unique. It was just the final page in a script dozens of actresses had read before her. Because in Golden Age Hollywood, scandal wasn't an accident. It was part of the job description. And for these 25 women, it wasn't how they got famous that defined them. It was how they survived it.